Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology and astrology in general and how it pertains to you and the world at large. We do have some very large events going on right now. First of all, I'll give you some background about myself. I've been a practicing astrologer for the past 30 plus years. I'm a former president of the Council of Vedic Astrology and former vice president of the Council of Vedic Astrology from around 2004 to 2010. And I was also a teacher and am still a teacher at Kepler College, which is a school devoted to astrology. I teach at Dyer Academy, which is devoted to astrology. I teach Saptarishi astrology, or give presentations of Saptarishi astrology more properly, and at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. And I'm also a teacher at the American College of Vedic Astrology. I'm also in the process of preparing a book. It's been 20 plus years in the making. And I'll also be opening my own classes. I do one-on-one instruction right now, but we'll have a formalized school within the next few months. So this has been something that's been on the back burner for a few years, as far back as about 5 years. And it just seems like the circumstances are coming together right now, which makes it viable. I will be adding additional instructors. It'll be me for the first few rounds. And hopefully you won't be disappointed at that. No, I'm told I'm a reasonably good teacher and or a very good teacher. And I also have some unique perspectives on astrology. I also have, I'm also a Reiki master. I'm a Temple of Kriya Yoga Swami, connected with the Kriya Yoga lineage. And I've done a bunch of other things. And a lot of the information we'll be talking about at the school will be more judged based upon not only astrological interpretation, which is extremely important, but also starting to cover some of the more obscure areas of astrology, like assigning names, picking good times to do things, what are called remedial measures or upayas, and a variety of other investigations which actually can help enhance your ability to navigate the world. Astrology is essentially an accumulation of karmas that we're manifesting in this lifetime. So it's not necessarily a sentence of things that we have to go through. So let's see. If we have some bad planets or bad activities in our chart, there are ways to ameliorate those, lessen them, or even avoid them through both proper planning and other techniques. So astrology is not, and there's always a free will component connected with astrology. So you don't have to accept the astrological chart as a life sentence. It's subject to alteration, is subject to modification. There is what are called kriya mana karmas, and those are actions we undertake ourselves in this lifetime. And there are also things called agama karmas, which are essentially rituals or ways to prevent different results from happening in the future. So they won't wipe out negative patterns in a chart, but they can actually either turn them positive or lessen their impact. So I think that's something a lot of people are interested in. That was one of the things I was interested in when I first got involved in Vedic astrology, and it's been an underlying theme of my practice for the past 30 years. So yes, we want to know what's going to happen, but we also want to know whether it's how to enhance or how to avoid negative, how to enhance positive results and how to avoid negative results. So I think it'll be interesting for people. Also, I am planning on opening up a music channel. I'm currently limited in terms of what I have available to share with you in those areas. Um, but that is coming, and that is coming rather soon. So I'm looking at clock on the wall. We have a rather big event going on right now, as everybody knows. We have a big war. We're still um, in the middle of a pandemic. Um, it's it's been downgraded by some authorities to epidemic, but it's still out there. It's still a potential threat. And we also have what's going on in between Ukraine and Russia right now with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, and the rest of the world's reaction to that event. So I thought it might be good. Last week I looked at um, the charts of Russia and the Ukraine, and we can pull those charts up right now just quickly. So this is the Russian Federation chart. Let me see, that's Abraham Lincoln's chart. I don't want that. That's not the Russian Federation. And that wasn't what I wanted either, but you know, one second, I will get to it. Okay, so this is for December 25th, 1991. And we can see from the chart there's let me just see if I can share the chart with you first of all before I go too far. And I'm going to try to share this a couple of times just to make sure that this actually does show up. Oops. Let me just share the screen again. Okay, so this is the Russian chart again. And you can see from the chart there's it's a rather powerful chart. The Lord of the 11th and the 8th house are in the first house. Mars is the Lord of the first and the 6th house, so it makes it rather a bellicose and a little bit underhanded chart, if I'm honest. There's a Sun Rahu conjunction in the 2nd house, so they will consciously misrepresent themselves. The Sun itself, I found it interesting that a lot of the activity leading up to the actual invasion started when Venus and Mars were in planetary war together in this particular sign. And I think they may have overestimated or invaded out of fear. Now, that may sound like I'm justifying what they did, but hear me out for a second. Yeah, I'm definitely not doing that. That's that, you know, so the invasion should never have happened. There should have, if they had concerns, they should have figured out some other way to handle it. But if Rahu is there and in a 2nd house, there's always an element of fear or paranoia or panic. And also, just given Jupiter's presence in the 4th house, there is a desire to expand the land base. I mean, That's given. But Mars is the lord of their sixth house of enemies. They're always conscious of their enemies. This is a rather paranoid and deceptive chart. So in some ways, if there's any anxiety over somebody invading their turf, and I just bring your memory back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't just happen because the Russians put nuclear weapons in Cuba. That was the cause from our perspective. But they put those missiles there because we had put missiles in Turkey. And that was their reaction. So I'm not defending the Russians. Don't get me wrong. This is not a game where there are no consequences. You know, this is war, and people get killed during wars. And let's look at the Ukraine chart again. And Russia is in a Sun, Mercury, Mars combination right now. So it absolutely thinks it's right. You know, and one of the reasons I'll say that is because we have a Sun Jupiter conjunction in the fourth house. It doesn't matter whether they're right or not. They think they're right. And that's causing this kind of stubbornness. Sun and Jupiter are almost exact degree in Aquarius. If you look at the Ukraine's chart now this is where it gets interesting. And we're going to look at Putin's and Zelensky's chart in a second. So we went through this last week a little bit, but this is more. And this is Ukraine's chart. Okay, so Ukraine is in what's called a 7.5-year period of Saturn. They've been under threat since around 2017. They've had a major disruption in government in 2017. They had scandals in government in 2017 because Saturn was passing over Rahu between 2017 and 2019 because Saturn was passing over Rahu. So Saturn is in the same sign with Saturn right now. So that makes it vulnerable. Saturn and Moon, it was founded when Saturn and Moon were in the same sign. And I find it interesting because 7.5-year periods of Saturn usually do tend to be rather traumatic events for most people, or most countries, or most individuals. And they can end up either toughening up the country or destroying it. Because the conjunction is with Saturn, it's going to be tough to destroy the country. That's one thing. But early next year, it looks difficult for the country to actually retain its position. So we're talking about 2023. If you look at the 7.5-year period of Saturn, K2 is going. So they both countries have the same rising sign. That's what I find fascinating. And they both have Jupiter in this sign. Okay, so again, both of them are going to think they're right. They are karmically tied because the Sun is in the same sign with the Moon, but that doesn't mean that Ukraine belongs to Russia. That's different. That's a different concept. And so let's go to Putin's chart just for a second. I just pulled this up today, and this chart, just to give you a heads up, this chart is extraordinarily disputed. And it's really a kind of an interesting chart for me because he was born just a few days after I was. So I'm not going to tell you my exact birthday, although I'm really not paranoid about it. But basically, he's got a lot of the same planetary placements I do. 3 important ones are different. And so his Mars is placed in Mula Nakshatra, which is a very destructive placement for Mars. Moon is placed in Taurus in Kritika Nakshatra, which is a very violent, very aggressive nakshatra. And the moon is Rahu passed over the nakshatra a few months ago. So I think what we're seeing in Putin's chart is his paranoia finally got the better of him. And maybe even delusions of grandeur got the better of him. K2 is passing through his second house, so his actions aren't, put it this way, his actions aren't being communicated well. It doesn't mean I'm just, again, like I said, I have to be very careful because K2 in the second house means people aren't listening to you, basically. And I think there were two reasons, if I'm judging this chart, that he invaded, and a lot of them have to do with Saturn. Saturn's in his 12th house. He's afraid of losing power. And he's in a Jupiter subperiod. So Jupiter subperiods tend to make people with charts like this. Jupiter's in the 8th house from Saturn. That would be true regardless of what his rising sign was. It'll give a fear of loss of position. It'll feel like the person's hemmed in. So one way to avoid that, and one way to expand land, obviously the expansion of land is important here, is to strike first, to strike before Ukraine can become a NATO country. Because if it became a NATO country, then you'd have Article 5 of NATO coming in, which would essentially require every NATO country to hit back at Russia. The reaction that he got is less. So there's a lot of bluster coming out of Putin's mouth, but towards the end of the month, or even earlier, we'll probably see a change in that because K2 will go in the first house and he'll feel like he's lost control. And Rahu will go into the 7th house. And interestingly enough, that will stymie his enemies though as well. So he'll be in a position where I think he really doesn't know what to do. There'll be a requirement for a ceasefire or some kind of a damping down of aggression. Although one of the things I'm not crazy about is Mars is in the same sign with Rahu and will be there for the next couple of months. So that may make him more panicky. And so it could go either way. But I'm betting after mid-March, when you see the sun change signs, there'll be at least some peace negotiations underway, and also people will calm down a little bit. I hope I'm right about that. But I also see a pattern in which the aggressive behavior or the attempt to influence Ukraine will continue throughout the summertime into January of next year. And if I'm looking at Zemlinsky's chart, and again, this is really, these aren't good charts. These aren't astronomically accurate charts. But right now, Saturn is in the same sign with the sun. So that's making him stubborn. But Mars is there as well. That'll make him fight. And he's got a Taurus rising, so he's a very stubborn person. So that's helpful to him. But if we look at the moon, and we look at there's a Mars-Moon conjunction in his chart, and that'll allow him to sacrifice his people. Saturn's in Leo. It looks like he's in a Moon-Jupiter major planetary period. Moon is technically a weak planet in Vedic astrology, although it's in its own sign in this chart. And it's a full moon, so that's good. That's good for his luck. But I think you'll see his position dangerously jeopardized over the next couple of months. And I think he'll even leave office next year, early next year, just because of the Saturn transits. And in terms of being able to negotiate a truce, um, or negotiate a ceasefire, it looks to me like that's more like he's in a Venus subperiod right now. I need to push the share command up just a little bit to see better. He's in a Venus subperiod right now. So he should be able to negotiate something after April 20th. And I think, or before April 20th, and I think after around March 12th, when Venus and Mars are out of this dance of planetary war, you'll see some progress being made on those fronts. But again, it'll only be a short-term reprieve. One thing I did notice about Putin's chart is roughly the same time he enters a Mercury major planetary period, China does as well. That tends to me to mean he may find other ways of attacking or compromising Ukraine. So essentially, there may be more cyber attacks on both China and Russia's part before the end of the year, and that'll cause more mayhem. I think if we look at the U.S.'s chart just quickly, yeah. So I'm not going to look at NATO's chart again. U.S.'s chart has K2 in the second house. Saturn is going over K2 right now. It'll go over K2 over the next until next January. So you will see some communications disruptions. Saturn's aspecting Mercury. You'll see fake press stories, but like I said, not just from Russia, but from China as well. You'll also probably see some fake stories from Ukraine. Okay, so I'm just warning you on that. It's not there. I'm not saying in terms of news coverage, but essentially, and I'm not saying in terms of people getting killed or anything like that, but some cyber attacks from Ukraine. So I I think we're entering a period by the end of the year in which cyber attacks will become relatively commonplace. The United States is in a Saturn subperiod. It'll be in a Saturn subperiod until next March. No, sorry, next September. My apologies, next September. And that'll be when the United States strikes back a bit. But I'm thinking that, at least from the chart, a lot of defenses will go up with that around that time. All the countries I've mentioned right now are in what I would call a precarious position because the nodes are affecting their first houses, their second houses, their eighth houses. So there's a lot of what I would call secret spying and dangers to the economies of those particular signs right now. The nodes in Saturn are affecting those houses. And the United States is about to enter a period in which Saturn goes over the moon. Now, that's not necessarily the worst thing. In the mid 1990s, Saturn went over the moon sign, this moon sign, and it didn't really. It was a time of scandals, a time of more conservative members entering Congress. I still think more conservative members will enter Congress in the fall, even with what's going on right now. I just think that's the pattern. But basically, from the chart, you'll see I think they'll back away from a guns war. I think you'll see a cyber war starting within about 6 or 7 months. I'm sorry, not 6 or 7 months, around 10 months. My apologies. Um, so let's look at the chart. Yeah, so what we would call disinformation wars. So let's look at and see what's happening now in the world. All right, so that's creepy enough. I'm guardedly optimistic that this won't turn into a full-scale shooting war between Russia and the NATO alliances. I'm not 100% sure about that, but just from what I've seen historically and from what I've seen from charts, that looks kind of doubtful to me. But again, will there be a cyber conflict? Probably. It's um, it's something that's been spoken about for many years, and it wouldn't surprise me at all that that were to happen. So let's go over here to the world chart. So you can see from this chart right here, we have a cluster of planets in between Capricorn and Aquarius. So this is Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. So again, we want to use the Sanskrit terms, which always give me a thrill. Meena, Mesha, Vrishab, Matun, Kanya, Sima, I'm sorry, Karka. My apologies, Karka, Sima, Kanya, Tula, Vrishika, Dhanus, Makara, Kumbha. All right, so we have Saturn aspecting Pisces right now. And this chart gives us a Cancer rising sign. So all the planets, so you have Venus, Mars, and Saturn aspecting Cancer. Mars is in its exalted sign, but that indicates problems with enemies, problems with fighting, things like that. So that's pretty accurate in terms of what's going on with the chart. The second house lord is in the eighth house. So there's some concerns about inflation, some concerns about money, some concerns about whether or not governments are going to be able to support themselves. And I think you will start to see some economic issues start to come up as a result of this conflict within the next month or so, which is also why I think they'll reach an agreement sooner rather than later. I also think, at least from the chart, you have now again, we've had these configurations before, and it hasn't necessarily answered a we haven't necessarily answered a recession. But Rahu is poised to answer Aries, Ketu is poised to answer Libra. Libra is pretty much the predominant planet connected with trade, or the predominant sign connected with trade. So Ketu in Libra will disrupt trade. It will disrupt communications. It will disrupt business. Rahu and Aries will give dissatisfaction with leadership. That's always been the pattern, and you'll start to see. So again, essentially, what you'll see is, I think, over the next year or so, is there'll be little increases in approval ratings of leaders across the world. I still think, and I'm going to insist on this, I still think you're going to see rioting or revolts in a lot of small countries around the world, mainly because things are getting so darn expensive everywhere. It isn't just in the United States. And this, and essentially the controls or economic sanctions which were imposed will actually make things more expensive for the average person. So again, we're not weighing goods for lives. That's not the idea. I'm just saying this is what will happen if you impose economic sanctions. If you impose restrictions on trades, things will get more expensive. It doesn't mean the economic sanctions shouldn't be in place, but it does mean there are consequences to economic sanctions. And they'll probably be felt for at least another year, probably into next September. The other thing is we have combinations over here. This Saturn, Mars, Venus, blessedly, Mercury just exited the Capricorn. So it's in Aquarius, but it's still pretty weak. So communications will be weak over the next week or so. And with the sun so close to Jupiter, good judgment is essentially how you say restricted. Okay, so diplomatic efforts will essentially fall flat until around March 15th. The other thing is you have the moon in Aries. This can give fires or alarms. Sun and Jupiter together can give air crashes. Saturn, Mars, Venus can give starvation, lack of use of farmland, and also people jockeying for position. And finally, Rahu and Taurus, people are very shaky monetarily. Ketu and Scorpio, the markets are going to be in sort of a panic over the next few months. So it doesn't mean they're going to fold up and crash and all this other stuff. It just means they're going to be very erratic. So at least from this chart, we have some improvement, some small improvement starting about a week and a half from now. So the sun's really the big culprit here, because the sun's insisting that that things be done a certain way, and it is in the sign connected with deposed kings. So that's, I find that interesting that Russia would decide to attack territory that it once had possession of, and now doesn't. But again, there is also an element of panic in Russia's attack. So it's not just land expansion. The other thing is, so let's look over here. I'm going to stop this here. I'm going to go to the next screen. All right. Let's see. You've all seen this before. I'm going to stop it here. And I'm going to start it here again. Okay, so we'll make it bigger so everyone can see it. And we'll get rid of this little guy, because that's not really important. All right, so This chart does show, interesting. Some struggles for supplies and goods happening around Hawaii, and prices getting really, really exaggerated in California and Oregon and Washington. So unable to get certain things. Jupiter and Sun are in conjunction over um, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Texas, Oklahoma and Texas, all the way down into Mexico. So essentially that means extraordinary governmental controls for that part of the world. You have a Venus and Mars line going right through Washington, D.C., so there's going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of anger happening in that part of the world, and actually close to Massachusetts as well. So the entire card of it, essentially roughly between New York and Washington, D.C., will be a little bit contentious over the next few months. You also have the moon going right through uh, right through the Amazon, actually, and so there'll be some flooding there and some catastrophes in that part of the world, some boating catastrophes in that part of the world, and also some problems with places like Rio de Janeiro, just because of these lines um, coming down here. So you're going to see basically some violence in that part of the world. You have a Mercury-Saturn line hitting the tip of Brazil, not interacting with much else, but hitting the tip of Brazil. And you see a Sun-Jupiter line hitting the west coast of Africa, Iceland, and influencing Portugal and Spain. So we're expecting to see some additional inflationary pressure there. Not a lot happening in Europe, actually, right now. So when I did the chart a little bit earlier this morning, there was panic in England, France, and Spain, but it's not quite there so much right now. There's a Venus-Mars line going right through middle of, very close to Ukraine, and right through the middle of Turkey into Egypt and Saudi Arabia, down as far as Sudan and South and Mozambique, Angola. And so those parts of the world will be very hot. They'll be very aggressive. We're not going to hear a lot about those parts of the world because we're all focused over here right now. But believe me, those parts of the world are going to be very, very disrupted. Moon is passing over the sign, so this will make the Russians more aggressive. And again, they'll be sure they're right because Jupiter's passing over that moon sign. Rahu is passing over Afghanistan and Pakistan and into China, so there'll be increased worry about supplies and disease in those countries. India has a Jupiter and Sun line going through it, so you'll see increased governmental control in those countries. And finally, let's go over to China. Doesn't have as many lines as I saw this morning, but on the east coast of China, you see a moon line coming through, and that'll affect, in some ways, that'll give some aggressive acting out in China. It'll give some aggressive acting out in Russia. So I mean by that, demonstrations. And when I say acting out, I'm not diminishing it. It's just a figure of speech I'm using. And you do have that Mars Rahu line going through Indonesia, um, the Philippines, New Guinea, and Japan. So Japan's going to have to watch out, in particular for things like earthquakes or or domestic violence. Finally, as we go over here to Mercury and Saturn, economic pressure on Australia. As a matter of fact, some panics in Australia and some water problems in the western part of the country. And finally, there's a Sun-Jupiter line running right next to New Zealand, but not really impacting New Zealand. So you'll probably have strict governmental controls, but not a lot of action, not a lot of aggressive action. Okay, so let's go back here to the chart. So basically, just as a general rule, when planets cluster into like one or two signs, it usually indicates big events are happening. So essentially, this the fact that something big that wasn't particularly great uh, would happen didn't surprise me. It's also connected with, in a sign connected with business and trade, so that, and also with land, so that didn't surprise me. But I think how quickly it happened sort of surprised me. But that was a Venus Mars conjunction. That was also panic on the part of the president of Russia, and also problems with communications with um, the current president of Ukraine. And again, keep something in mind. I'm not blaming the Ukraine for being invaded. That's not the idea. But from the chart, Zelensky looks like a very stubborn man. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but if an equally stubborn and sneaky man wants to get your attention, you should pay attention. So essentially, and again, one thing you'll always notice in wars is every side thinks it's right. It's not that the Russians are going to say, "Oh yeah, we were wrong. We really screwed up. We shouldn't have invaded." That usually happens like 20 years after the fact. So the United States is still dealing with the fact that in all probability we made a mistake in Vietnam. Okay, so it's just nations don't accept blame or responsibility very easily. All right, so let's look at the actual astrological signs, and so we can wrap this up, and you can get on to other things in your life, but also use this information as it applies to your own life. The moon is in Aries as we start the month. I'm just checking my time. Excuse me. And Rahu's in the second house, but a lot of focus on action and activity in this chart. So this sign is feeling a little bit frustrated. It wants to do things. It'll finally be able to do things over the next couple of months, but it still feels a little bit hamstrung because of the Mars-Saturn conjunction. And also it'll be able to take some action in relationship matters too. But again, there'll be delays. Finances should be good. Taurus has Rahu about to leave the sign, K2 about to leave its seventh house. So any kind of relationship issues will probably calm down or be resolved relatively quickly. But there'll be a Saturn aspect on Scorpio pretty soon, so they'll probably increase relationship anxiety for this sign over the next few months. But career life looks good, although bosses tend to look picky or like they're worrying. But basically, career life looks good. For Gemini, Gemini is finally getting a little bit of a break in relationship matters, but again, that's also they're also getting a lot of burdens of the relationship partner's demands, and the relationship partner is going to seem to be a little bit difficult to deal with. That Sun, Mercury, Jupiter conjunction, communications will be difficult. In terms of legacies or work, money will be a little bit tough to come by, but they'll start to get more money coming in within about a week. Moon, Cancer has a lot of planets in the 7th house, so over the next, it's still going to be a matter of problems in relationships for this sign, really until January of 2023. Sorry to tell you that, but that's really how long Saturn is going to be there or influencing that sign. But there will be some legacies or some financial benefits to the sign after March 15th. And also, Moon is in the 9th house, so essentially it's a lucky. Moon is in the 10th house, so it's a lot of career focus for the sign this month. Leo has Jupiter and Sun in the 7th house, so there's a lot of relationship intensity right now, a lot of like impatience about relationships, and the same is true of Aquarius, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. And the 6th house does indicate some problems with communications, and some problems with consumption, but Jupiter and Moon in the 7th house Jupiter and Sun in the 7th house kind of saves the chart, but there'll be a lot of relationship focus. For Virgo has K2 in the 3rd house, which is courageous. You have a lot of planets in the 5th house, so it's basically a lucky time for this chart, although it won't feel lucky. And you'll have Jupiter, Sun, and Mercury in the 6th house, which can make the sign overindulge a little bit. For Libra has a lot of planets in the 4th house, so a lot of construction-related projects will start moving forward. A lot of educational projects will start moving forward, but not without fighting about it. And also, there'll be financial gains, especially from teaching, and also relationship opportunities because of the Moon in the 7th house. For Scorpio has it's about to lose K2 and Rahu as an influence, but its Mars is about to hit Saturn, so the next month is still going to be rough for Scorpio rising. And as a matter of fact, there'll be a decline in status for this sign over the next month or so. So when Saturn enters this sign, you'll see about 2 months in which the sign is struggling. It'll still have a lot of hardships and a lot of struggles. In terms of other matters, they'll have to watch out for health issues and overly critical bosses. For Sagittarius has Saturn, Mars, and Mercury, Saturn, Mars, and Venus, in the 2nd house. So that's good for financial growth. But again, it's very slow. It's almost like snail-like, but it is growing slowly but surely. Sun and Jupiter in the 3rd house. It'll give this sign more courage, more ability, but it'll also think it's right. It's absolutely right. So the United States chart that I use is a Sagittarius rising chart. So it absolutely thinks it's doing the right thing right now. It's just no questioning it. And you'll see more questioning of it after around March 15th. The Moon is in the 5th house, so essentially it's a lucky time for this particular chart. And going on to Capricorn, Saturn, Venus, and Mars are in the 1st house, So that will make pretty much dictators kind of powerful right now. Almost any kind of dictator will seem very powerful right now. Governments will seem very restrictive, but there'll also be violent action towards governments because of Mars exaltation and Sun and Jupiter in the second house. So again, that kind of tight control that will continue to manifest for at least another couple of weeks, and then you'll see a little bit of a breakup in that, and possibly a change of residence for this rising sign over the next few months. For Aquarius, Aquarius has so a lot of focus on power and concentration of wealth for Capricorns. For Aquarius, a lot of spending, but also a lot of discipline, a lot of focus on spiritual life, and also, at least from this chart, Jupiter, Lord of the second and the 11th house, will tend to bring more money in and more financial growth. This forms kind of a Dana Yoga or wealth-producing combination for the sign, but it will come at a cost because of Saturn being in the 12th house. Excuse me. For Pisces, finally, Pisces has no planets in the first house, the Lord of the first house in the 12th house, and that particular combination tends to make that sign kind of self-effacing, but good with money, and also it will eliminate diseases or hardships. Rahu's in the third, so that, and Moon is in the second, so financial growth should be expected. And you have Saturn, Mars, and Venus in the 11th house, so that should be good for financial growth, but again, slowly. Some difficulties with bosses, though. So that's it for this week. I'll spare you the effort of me trying to put the ending on this particular presentation. I want to wish you all the best of luck. Hang in there. Be brave. Be stalwart. Be steady. Bad times can't last forever. Okay. Although it seems like they have. But after September next year, you'll look back at this and say, "Haha, this was really funny." Hopefully, and there'll be more emphasis on communications and both the damage and the opportunities that will bring. The good thing about, if there is such a good thing about cyber infiltration, is that it will increase our communications channels. It will increase our communications capability. So I think you'll actually see technological innovations starting towards the end of next year, the likes of which you haven't seen in a long time. So right now, it's difficult to imagine technological innovations occurring in the current environment, but you'll start to see a lot more of them coming up over the next, not this year, but next year and into 2024. So I think it'll be an interesting time for us. Also, if I'm not really a big fan of cryptocurrency, just in principle, but you'll actually see cryptocurrency markets expand in 2023 to 2024. But also some crashes in certain important parts of that market. So that's a really big takeaway. I want to wish you all the best of luck. Namaste. I love you all. And please stay tuned. Like, share, and join so we can build a membership and hopefully expand our reach. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. I love you all.